Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Later today I will join Mary Robinson, the former President of Ireland, at the launch of Scotland's Climate Justice Fund. The Scottish Government is providing £3 million for the fund, £1 million per year over the next 3 years, which will support water projects in Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania and Zambia, increasing some of the world's poorest communities' resilience to the impacts of climate change. I think it's an area where the Chamber will agree that Scotland is providing strong leadership on a hugely important issue, and we call on other industrialised nations to share our ambitions on climate justice.
Joanne Lamont.
And of course we would support Scotland working in partnership in these very, very important issues across the world. On Sunday night on BBC Scotland, the Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, assured viewers that an independent Scotland would have a seat on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. Can the First Minister confirm this? Let us know the details of that agreement, and if it's not been finally signed off, at least tell us when negotiations started.
First Minister. First Minister.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England has 9 members on it. 4 members are appointed by the Treasury. We would expect to be part of the appointments process. There's nothing unusual about that. I mean, in current circumstances, for example, well, we've just been talking about the climate change issue. The chair of the Committee on Climate Change is jointly appointed at the present moment. In addition, the Treasury has a non-voting observer on the Monetary Policy Committee. We would expect to have the same thing. The current issue is that we have no influence as a country on the Monetary Policy Committee. The Bank of England is an independent central bank. It doesn't take direction on policy, but we should move from a position of having no influence to having proper regard in a sterling area. Now, these are arrangements.
Order. Can we hear the First Minister,
These are
please?
arrangements in place between independent countries. It really requires a remarkable diminished view of Scotland and its position not to believe that we'd be entitled to the same representation as other people making the same arrangements would make. And finally, and FISAB, which is a committee which is of one of the Scottish Government at the present moment, we have a UK Treasury observer on FISAB. Why should Joanne Lamont think that any of these things would be unusual for an independent Scotland? And as I've discussed with her before, given that we would be providing some £30,000 million sterling of protection for the UK balance of payments, I think the UK Treasury and the Bank of England would be glad to have us there.
Joanne Lamont. Ms. Lamont.
Even by the First Minister's standards, that's an absolutely astonishing response to what was a very simple question. And I think the response to the question was Nicola Sturgeon was wrong when she said that. It is about assertion and belief and hope. But the problem is, of course, the First Minister thinks an independent Scotland would have influence on the Monetary Policy Committee. We don't have influence now, but we will have somehow when Scotland is a foreign country. It does simply beggar belief. Because, of course, crucial to the First Minister's plans to keep the pound after Scotland leaves the United Kingdom is that the Bank of England, and therefore the UK Treasury, agree to being Scotland's lender of last resort. Now, a deal like that would come with a lot of conditions attached. Even clearly, as he hasn't spoken to the Bank of England about the Monetary Policy Committee, can he confirm he's at least spoken to them about being our lender of last resort?
First Minister.
Joanne Lamont reverting to reading her script once again, which indicates that regardless of how I answer her question, she's going to get her head down and read the script. The Scottish Government and myself spoke to the Governor of the Bank of England on the 16th of February, if I remember correctly, but I set out exactly why Nicola Sturgeon's answer was correct. Yeah. It is the case that we have no influence at the present moment. Joanne Lamont might remember yesterday's debate when I asked her how many Scottish members are there currently of the Monetary Policy Committee, and I didn't get an answer to that because the answer is 0, nil point, none whatsoever. at the present moment, so we are established that we have no influence at the present moment. We have established that the Bank of England operates as an independent central bank, and I've set out how it would be entirely reasonable to see an independent Scotland having the influence the UK Treasury has at the present moment, and I've pointed out in a range of other areas of key importance, then we have jointly shared arrangements on appointments at the present moment. That seems to me kind of a grown-up attitude to how you conduct government. What it doesn't do or depend on is this peculiarly unionist coalition attitude to the world. This hand-in-glove assumption that a country which was providing, under these circumstances, £30 billion sterling protection to the UK balance of payments would have no influence whatsoever. Why does Joanne Lamont always want to diminish Scotland's abilities and its influence?
Joanne Lamont.
I've always told my children it's not growing up just to cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's not growing up for the First Minister to be incapable to argue for something he has believed for 40 years, never mind a script. He can't answer basic questions about simple economics in an independent Scotland. So, we know he hasn't asked the question about the MPC, he hasn't asked the question about banker of last resort. If the First Minister gets his way, we are fewer than 4 years away from leaving the UK. Yet, on a wing and a prayer, yet on the currency, on our interest rates, on how much we'd be able to spend, how much we could borrow, how much tax we could raise, he has done nothing. He asserts that an independent Scotland could rely on the Bank of England, but he hasn't even asked them. It's just meaningless assertion after meaningless assertion. If he wants the Bank of England to back a separate Scotland, why doesn't he at least ask them what they're willing to do?
First Minister.
I'm answering and giving an explanation of what I believe the position would be. I'm not responsible for Joanne Lamont not being able to ask the right questions. I'm answering questions as being able. I've set out the context of monetary policy and how it's administered. I've set out the shape of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England. I've pointed out to Joanne Lamont that the Bank of England has been an independent bank since 1997 to give it freedom from political determination. I've set out the reasons why it wouldn't just be to Scotland's advantage but to the rest of the UK's advantage to have the sterling zone that we propose. If I could... Sterling zone is a matter which is well understood in terms of currencies and politics. I don't know why the Labour Party should find such a simple explanation. So it's revealing about the Labour Party's attitude. The advantage for Scotland would be it's a reasonable proposition in the current circumstances to see it to Scotland's advantage to have the sterling zone. It's of substantial advantage to the rest of the United Kingdom because of the protection that Scottish resources will give the balance of payments. Now, under these circumstances, why is that not our proposition that we should put to the Scottish people? As Joanne Lamont knows, we publish a white paper next year given the independence proposition, and I'll be delighted to take her forecast on the timescale for Scottish independence. Whether she should throw in the deck at this stage or whether she should wait for the 4 years, 4 years sounds fine to me, and I think it will sound fine to the people of Scotland.
Joanne Lamont. Miss Lamont.
I didn't realise that there was a right question I could ask the First Minister. Given that the only right question his backbench is allowed to ask is, just how good are you, First Minister? This is a serious issue. And given the response today from the First Minister, no wonder the First Minister flopped at the box office last Friday. No wonder his his deputy bombed on the TV on Sunday night. And no wonder this week some of supporters have started backing away from independence. If he is going to put the country through another 2.5 years of this constitutional quagmire, he at least could do some work so his words had some meaning. When will the First Minister realise that just because he says something doesn't make it true?
First Minister.
The proposition we put forward in the White Paper next year, the timescale for the referendum that we've set out. I am interested in Jan Lamont's belief that the independence campaign will like the strength and vigour of the Tory-Labour alliance which is going to be put forward against it. The Secret Six who met in Alistair Darling's home. When I was a child, occasionally I read Ian Blyton's books on the Secret Seven, so no doubt the Secret Six is something very similar. I think the Labour-Tory alliance, constrained against independence, which we see so well displayed in this chamber, will be limited in numbers, limited in enthusiasm, but above all limited in its ambition that it has for the people of Scotland. I know that Jan Lamont these days is taking to speak on behalf of the people of Scotland.
She wishes.
Maybe she should just go through the precaution of trying to get herself elected first before she takes on that presumption.